Welcome back to a mental health break with Vincent A. Lanci. I'm excited to launch another episode for you all. I'm Vincent Lanci, speaker and author of the book Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption. When I was 21 years old, I was the victim of a hit and run accident while walking home from a friend's birthday. After coming out of a coma and suffering from a traumatic brain injury, or you may know of as a TBI, I soon realized that it was time to put my mental health on a very, very high pedestal. So this podcast is all things mental health. Would it benefit you to hear from mental health professionals and influencers? Would it also add value to your life to hear authentic stories from people talking about their mental health, the issues they face, and how they actively combat them? If so, you're definitely in the right place, and I want to start this episode by congratulating you for making your mental health a priority. On this episode, I'm happy to introduce my guest, Meridith Alexander. Meridith and I are both in the TGH or Tampa General Hospital family and have become wonderful friends over the last year. Our last meeting was in Tallahassee, Florida at the State Capitol building, where we had the opportunity to share our stories to members of legislature to help them improve the laws surrounding healthcare. Meridith, great to see you again, and thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, great to see you too, Vince, and hello to all of your listeners out there. We're super psyched that you're here today.
Yes, we are. Meridith, please go ahead and preview just a bit of your story before we hop into the questions and touch on a bit what you're working on today.
Sure. Well, I like to say that I'm in the business of helping people come even more alive, actually. And this really started in 2016 when my youngest daughter was in South America on a fellowship from Yale, helping to build schools and do all kinds of really cool social enterprise things. And all of a sudden, I got the call that randomly, careening off the side of a mountain had come this boulder and absolutely crushed her. She was not expected to survive. At least 4 of her injuries were considered fatal. And the next thing I knew, I was flying on a plane to Colombia, where they had her hospitalized. And what was interesting for us in our journey as I began really trying to feel what I could do as, in this case, a bystander, what could I do to empower the situation? And it helped me to realize the uncanny power of mindset in just about anything and how powerful our minds can be, even to influence things that would appear to be impossible. So that has led me into full-time really helping other people understand that whatever it is that is their boulder in their life doesn't have to be there as a powerful lesson in how to avoid death or how to avoid failing or pain. These boulders really truly come as a powerful message of how to choose to live.
Absolutely. Sometimes the transformative incidents, they're horrible, of course, but people like us, we find the light at the end of the tunnel. And now
Right.
I'm very grateful that you joined the podcast because we're able to share some of that insight we've gained through these experiences. So thanks for sharing that, Meredith.
Yeah.
And what I do on each episode is I share a mental health story of someone who is famous because I want to let you, the listeners, know that you are not alone. I want you to understand that even though someone looks like they're healthy from the outside, has a ton of money, they may be on the opposite on the inside. I will now introduce the path of Demi Lovato. Here are some takeaways I had from the story. She had a nice big break at just 19 years old, where for the Disney Channel, she starred in a made-for-TV movie called Camp Rock. Later in 2011, she was diagnosed with a case of bipolar disorder while being an inpatient at Timberline Knolls in Illinois. She is now featuring with MTV on a documentary called Stay Strong, where she shares her secrets and story because, quote, people need to hear it. She also says that although her life is a daily struggle, she's now in complete control of her life. She loves it, and now she wants to inspire people with that story. Meredith, have you heard about her situation before?
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. And I think there are just more and more people just like that who really, really are coming forward. And it continues to consistently come down to owning how you show up, owning who you are, and owning a bigger version of you beyond the labels, beyond the diagnoses, and realizing that we have so many more choices over who we are than sometimes we recognize. And most certainly we are not alone.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. So now we're going to hop into the main events. Each episode, my guest and I go over these 6 questions. My goal is to feature many valuable guests on this podcast, including people talking about their mental health, doctors, as well as influencers. I will ask the doctors to join the show a series of 6 questions, while my patients and non-licensed influencers a slightly different series of 6 questions. I do this to create as much value as possible for the listeners. You ready to go, Meridith?
Absolutely.
Great. Number 1 starts with, many people would agree the more common or talked about at least types of mental illnesses are mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and schizophrenia disorders. What areas do you or did you battle or come across the most with your experiences with patients?
So even though there were a lot of those kind of disorders, what I find in what I do when I am coaching people either in their careers or in their lifestyles is that there are a lot of things that don't necessarily have the title disorder that really still keep us in the space of being our own worst enemy. And a lot of it is the conditioning, and a lot of it is how we're processing our own stories, and we're buying into certain conditioning that we might have processed when we were 7 years old or younger. And even as we live on in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, sometimes we're believing the same limited perspective without ever going back and asking why.
It's a great way to put it. I think you're definitely head on with that. When did you realize that it was first time to start paying attention to your mental health?
So really for me, the big thing, I've always been interested in why some people are able to quote unquote achieve miracles or to find the I'm possible and the impossible. But it really, really came to a head when I got that call about Skylar, my daughter. And I really had to make a decision of how I was going to show up and what I was going to make this mean in the context of both of our lives. And I was not satisfied to be stuck in that deluge of really negative feelings and despair and emotion. And the biggest one that was the biggest monster for me was that feeling of having no power or no control, and that this had happened to us. And I wasn't willing to stay there. And I realized that the only kind of life ring out of there was finding a way to believe that the I'm possible was hidden inside of the impossible, that there was some way to get some semblance of power back. And I realized that I could not control the outer game elements that had come our way. I couldn't undo that boulder. I couldn't undo the injuries, but I sure as heck could play a mean inner game. And so from that moment, I said, game on. And I began sharing that with people who were initially in our community. The following grew very, very quickly because people began to see that this wasn't just about our lives. This was about their lives as well, and showing up saying game on in their own lives.
Absolutely. I know you personally, so I know all the good you do and how positive you are for people. It's so contagious. And it is, like I said, it's easier said than done to tune out the uncontrollable. A lot of times, I speak for myself too, everybody is guilty at times to let it affect them a little bit, but the mind over matter, you push through it and you do find the impossible and the impossible. It's a great way to put it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing just to add to that
Please,
is
yes.
one thing to add to that is a lot of people would ask me how I was able to stay so focused on the bright side. And what I would always reply to people is that I wasn't focused on the bright side, because if I was focused on the bright side, the invisible story within that is that actually what I'm focused on or trying to focus on is the lack of the presence of the dark side, which meant my focus, even though I may shout it out that I'm looking at the bright side, the only reason it's bright is because I'm so freaking aware of this ominous dark side that can swallow us up at any moment. I had to find a way to authentically and genuinely, tiny thought by tiny thought, inch my way up to a place where all of a sudden the impossible seemed totally possible.
Back on top of the hill there. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. What advice can you give to our listeners, Meredith, as what may be considered an early sign that they could be developing a mental illness?
So, so there are a lot of great things written about kind of falling into mental sort of illness, and one of my favorites actually that takes a slightly different skew on that is Dr. Joe Dispenza, who actually is a neuroscientist that studies the way our minds work and therefore how we actually create our realities, and how thoughts that begin in the mind can actually begin to change us on a cellular level. And they can begin to do that so consistently that we began to show signs of certain symptoms. And so one of the things that I'm real passionate about is where we put our focus. So I'm going to turn that question a little bit. For me, when I work with my clients, one thing that maybe I do slightly differently, and this is with anybody. This is not someone necessarily who's been diagnosed specifically yet. This is with anyone and everyone who wants to feel better, who wants to show up in their top 1% consistently, who wants to be even bigger, who wants to live even more and come even more alive, right? And so for me, my experience is one of the first things I ask people to do is get beyond the labels, right? Often we have labels, and I'm, certainly not advocating, throw away any medication that's been prescribed for you or anything. But what I am saying are things like, even like an introvert, right? When have you ever walked up and complimented by someone by saying, "Oh gosh, you were such an introvert"? And so people who buy into saying, "Well, I'm really an introvert," the equally the same story here is I'm someone who walks into a room, and guess what? I don't have to be the center of attention. In fact, I love walking into the room and having the first thing that I do is really observe who's there. I like to listen sometimes when people don't even realizing I'm listening, and I like to really think and really digest what is being said. And I promise you, I may not say a lot, but when I say something, it will be something I'm passionate about and something worth hearing. So if
Love
I
it.
want to, if you want to call me an introvert, knock yourself out. But that is who I am, standing in my power. I take ownership. I get to define myself at the end of the day. And I'm not going to fall into any neat little boxes as far as introvert goes. So that's kind of what I would add to this little segment from my experiences with the people that I work with.
That's a great way to put it. A lot of things are controllable, like you're saying, the way you eat, the things you do, your habits, surrounding yourself with the right people. It's great to get all different perspectives with that question on this show. So thank you for that. This one's interesting, Meredith. If you could only pick three, and just three, what would
Right.
the three most important things that you can give our listeners advice on to start improving their mental health on a daily basis? So some short-term initiatives.
Sure. First thing is what I work with every single one of my clients on, and that is creating their own, what I like to call personal empowerment system, right? We all work on systems, but most of our systems are basically reactive, right? We get up in the morning, we maybe take a shower, brush our teeth, throw some clothes on, maybe get some food, and run out the door and say, life, have at me. And I'm going to try to dodge and avoid and react as best I can. Whereas if you if you listen to the even more podcasts and you listen to people who are the happiest versions of themselves, the healthiest versions of themselves, the success, whatever that means to them, these are people who take deliberate intent and focus to their systems. So if that means for many people setting an intention in the morning, first thing you do, what's your intention for your day? Meditation is huge, and I'm going to sneak that into number 2 thing, because it's so important. And it's not meditation because you want to shut up your mind. By any means, it's not meditation in my experience because you simply want to relax. Meditation is the opportunity to practice deliberately telling your mind where you would like it to go. So when you have a guided meditation, when you're starting out and you're listening to this guided tour and you nudge your mind back diligently and consistently back to the story, guess what? You are practicing asserting yourself over your thoughts, as opposed to what can often happen to us and letting our thoughts think us. So the more you practice in the context of meditation, the easier it's going to be when you get into those quote unquote stressful scenarios to say, okay, thank you, mind, for sharing. Let's go over here now. Let's think of
Great way
one
to
thought.
put it. I
Yeah.
love that one. For me, meditation, I've slowly been utilizing. My outlet is more the gym and the exercise. That's my endorphin release. Because I always expected this meditation to be this miracle worker where I'm going to meditate and it's going to be boom, I'm amazed and I'm done. And it wasn't like that. So when I accepted it for what it was, like you said, just letting go and telling myself I can shut off right now, actually it's pretty incredible.
Yes, absolutely. And when you consistently practice meditation, it is amazing the things that once you've been doing it 30 days or so. And again, this is why I call it a personal empowerment system, a system you don't do once and say, okay, this is like a diploma, put it on my wall. I meditated. Bingo. This is something that becomes something as important to you in your priorities as eating, because you realize that eventually if you stop consuming food, you're going to have a physical reaction to that. So if you decide to kind of consistently skip something like your meditation and really guiding deliberately your mindset, it's also going to have a starvation effect. It's going to change you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I can't emphasize the potential power of meditation highly enough. And then I alluded to it. So your personal empowerment system is a big one, but I'm going to pick out there. I was like torn between.
I'll tell you what, we'll give you 2 if they're
that
good.
Good. Yes. Oh, okay.
Everybody that comes on, they're like, I make it 3 just because I want to get the 3 most feasible steps our listeners can take. So let's hear 2 more. I'm excited to hear them.
Okay. So 2 more. One is on a daily basis. If you feel that sandpaper and you're just kind of like being pulled down slightly, the one thing that I would say is reach for that one tiny thought that feels just a little bit better. And if you're stuck on finding that one thought often lies in, going back to your point, that you are not alone. Think of or ask yourself a question, and I ask myself this on the plane on the way to South America: has there ever been another human being who has seen something miraculous happen in their life? Boom. When I asked that question, the answer, which my mind could buy into and knew that this was not me, sharing the BS with myself. This was authentic. This was real. This was measurable and provable. And the answer was definitely yes. So therefore, logically and supported, if one miracle can happen, why not 2? And have there been 2 miracles? Absolutely. There have been thousands and millions of impossible things that have happened throughout time on a regular basis. So if that's the case, if that can happen for them, why not in our story? So that's one little tiny thought to help you feel a little bit better. And as you inch your way up from despair to a little bit of hope, and then you find a thought that helps you get from hope to a little bit of belief, and then once you can take that thought even higher to the power of expectation, where you say, I know if they can frickin' do it, and I know because I've done it in other aspects of my life, and I know that pig-headed may not always work for me, but pig-headed right now is what is going to rocket fuel this situation, right? It's going to work for me. When you get there, it's as if life has to conform to your vision. It's freaky amazing. So that's number one thought that feels better. And then number two is kind of an extension of that, is when you're feeling a little bit down on yourself, or feeling like, what is the situation doing to you? And you want to feel more like, what is the situation potentially doing for you? Take a minute and either write down or have the conversation in your head of your future self. Imagine walking into one of your favorite places 5 years from now, your future self who is everywhere that you dream that it could possibly be, and even bigger, sitting down with you and saying, I know we've been there together. I know how tough this seems to you right now, but let me just tell you that thanks for you just enduring this temporarily, that big powerful word, temporarily, we're freaking gonna get everything that you've been dreaming for and then some. And
Absolutely.
thanks to you doing this, right?
Yeah, a lot of great things. A lot of things that you said, I loved. Things take time. They're not overnight. 30 days meditating. It's like with people with medications, and I was guilty at this at first. Granted, I'm blessed where I've weaned myself off everything because I realized I was in a cloud at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes time. You have to be patient. And the first example you brought back, the brain's a powerful muscle. If
Yep.
not, it controls everything. You're positive. You'll find a way through it. And I love the way that you talk about the impossible. And the way I look at impossible is, I kind of delete that word, just less likely.
Right.
It's not impossible because I wouldn't be here. Sky
Right.
wouldn't. It would not. It was
Right.
less likely. And what did we do? We did it. Thanks for sharing all that. So those are some great
Absolutely.
short-term initiatives you gave everybody listening on. Let's touch on maybe 2 longer-term commitments our listeners can create a more healthy, positive mental headspace.
So for the long-term commitment, I would go back to that personal empowerment system. Consistency is the magic formula. Consistency and um, being willing to think of the butterfly effect. That's why one of my biggest programs is called the butterfly effect, deliberately for a specific reason, and it's that science has studied and shown that we are so connected, and that we are so energetically juiced, if you want to say, that the path of a tornado can be impacted by the simple flutter of a pair of butterfly wings 2 weeks before, right? So it's little tiny flutters of those butterfly wings, being willing to trust the process enough to be willing to your point, do it consistently, and expect, the power of expectation, that the impossible will quickly in the grand scheme of eternity, right? What are
Mm-hmm.
10 years, even in the scheme of eternity, right? Will ultimately transform into a reality that's even bigger than the dream,
I couldn't
right?
agree more. Consistency is everything for me. I really don't enjoy drinking that much. I'll go out once in a while, of course. You meet
Mm-hmm.
your friends out. But for me, I mentally liked my structure schedule. I do every day. I'm up at 2:30, sometimes 1:30, and I start my day. And I enjoy working the 15 hours because I finally love what I do. And the consistency plays the whole role for me. I have the flexibility because I'm an entrepreneur. Obviously, I
Right.
choose when I like to do things. But as far as my beginning day, wake up, make the bed.
Yep.
I have my steps, my structure, and per our last conversation, everybody listening in, Meredith is also on my other podcast, What It's Really Like to Be an Entrepreneur. She rejuvenated a thought that kind of expired or was forgotten with the web, writing thoughts in a web on the paper opposed to the list, because I tend to create these laundry lists every time I start writing, and then
Yep.
prioritizing these things becomes less clear, unintentionally, not failing, just less productive. So my web, I mean, I'm rocking and rolling these podcasts. I mean, now we're rolling 4 days a week between the templates, this, that, and then still trying to get my speaking gigs and my tutoring and my teaching. So it's amazing.
Right. And I think that kind of leads to a second kind of big
Please, yes.
picture, a second big picture sort of thing that ties into that. And that is, I have found that when people start feeling overwhelmed or stuck, it's because they have temporarily, there's that word again, temporarily lost sight of what their mission and their passion is, and how on a daily basis to be not only prioritizing but deprioritizing, and then marrying that mission and passion with your skills and your experience slash experiences, those powerful moments throughout your life that make you who you are, and your must-haves in life, and then your wouldn't it be nice ifs, and finding ways to ensure that every single day those elements are in everything that you do, and that the passion helps you create that priority, right? The prioritization and the deprioritization, right? And little steps for little feet consistently applied to that one thing
Always.
leave you unstoppable and making a positive
Always.
impact on the world.
Always. Great insight there. Thank you so much. Now we're up to number 6. Time flies on these for
Yep.
sure. What are some ways that you plan on raising awareness for the importance of mental health in the near future? Please share.
So for me, one of the big projects that I'm working on is really, I'm doing more and more of group coaching and actually some live events where I'm giving people really the opportunity to build some of these elements and to tap into some of the really most powerful mindset secret sauces, if you have, that will allow, because I've been working with so many people one-on-one, and yet there's only one of me, so there's only so much that I
Isn't
can.
it hard?
I know. It's like, so I've had people say, look, I want your insights. I want to help with I'm ready for a major breakthrough. So I've really been continuing to play with that. My personal mission is to positively impact 5 million or more people by 2025. And so
I think you're on your way.
I'm having a blast, and it's why, like you, why I wake up in the morning. I love
I
what I
never
do.
felt the sense, I guess you can call it purpose in a way, with the money and the jobs I had. I went to school in 2009, I left high school, and that was when the recession started. So I thought to myself,
Mm-hmm.
what degree can I hold that would give me a decent probability at least getting a job? Whether I liked it or not, I got to get a job. Took finance, and I love the art of finance, preparing cash. I do like it. However, in the office, I found myself staring at the clock far too much, commuting to work far too many hours, and things I can't get back. And I'm still trying to make this dream come true. And I prematurely left maybe, but now the hard work and the consistency is finally showing some lights. I'm nowhere near where I want to be. I'm still nothing yet, but laying the brickwork for the brand building with the 2 podcasts now to supplement the book. I'm trying to work on this children's book as I speak to elementary schools. So I think our goals are very much aligned as far as we want to help people. At the end of the day, we enjoy it. So just continue with the consistency and
Absolutely. And I think you hit on the other super important word for the listeners. And one I mentioned was temporary, but the other you automatically put yet in there. Yet. I haven't gotten there yet, Well, yet is the operational word
And
because
it's
the
no if.
expectation, right? The expectation is there, right? The expectation is there, and that's where we totally launch into our power. And I think sometimes it's easy to overlook that when you make a statement, when we all make a statement, well, I'm not there, or even if we say, wait a minute, this moment is what becoming an influencer looks like. This moment is what becoming, if your goal is to be a millionaire, this moment is part of what that looks like. This right now, it's not like the journey, your trip, when you program it into a GPS, isn't just, okay, it doesn't count until you actually get to Philadelphia. No, it's the entire span of the journey from, if you're starting from San Francisco, it's the entire journey. It's that first mile as much as the last mile. So you are living the dream. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice for people who, one is to identify your dream. Stop long enough to figure out what your passion is and how you can turn it into a legacy or a dream. And then when you've done that, to acknowledge that you reverse engineer back what is one thing that you can acknowledge that you can do beginning today that will help you make those steps and expect that surprise and delight that the universe will deliver for you. And don't be so sure that you know exactly what success looks like along the way. Sometimes success means getting whacked in the face because, your big dream lies in a different direction,
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I'm so glad you
right?
came on today. Thank you so much for everything you provided our listeners today, Meredith. I truly enjoyed all of the value you provided and how you just made it so simple sometimes, just do it. Just do it.
Just do it. Yes.
It's time for the last word though, Meredith. This is something I do on my other podcast, but it's really like to be an entrepreneur also because I want our listeners to really get to know my guest. Is there something that you'd like to share with the listeners that we did not touch on today?
Um, I I think maybe what I would like to touch on is really emphasizing that those things, and I guess I'll go back to this, is that we spend sometimes so much energy trying to dodge and avoid the things that we are feel that could hurt us or cause us pain or would mean that we've missed the boat or we've gone the wrong direction, when the further I go through life and the more people that I work with, the more that I realize that it's a partnership. Of course, we want those moments when we're saying yippee and the confetti's flowing and it's just yay. But it is those moments that can stop us in our tracks, those big boulders that we have to learn how to possibly embrace. Those are the moments that help us with the massive discoveries that, were it just the celebration through life, we would never get to. So if you are listening to this podcast right now, and if you have been hit with your own version of a boulder, I would say think of those words temporary, think of those words yet, and figure out how you can embrace this boulder. Scoot around it and look at it from many, many different perspectives and realize that deep in this boulder might just end up being the things that are the ultimate jewels in the crown of what will ultimately be your life.
It's another thing we're all always guilty of is not being able to, at least in the beginning or at first, see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're blinded by something so big, so dark. It's easy to roll over and cry, why me, why me? Something I thought I was probably going to do with my situation, but something kicked into me. I wanted more out of life, turn a bad day to the good day, and it leads us to something like this here today to make a positive change in the world. Meredith, thanks so much again. Can you please share your social media or your website, ways for our listeners to either request your services or at least follow your journey?
Sure, absolutely. So, if you happen to be interested in connecting with me about one of my programs, the coaching or the live events, then you can contact me through gritmindsetacademy.com. If you're interested in having me speak for your group, your organization, your event, then please reach out to me at meridithalexander.com, which is Meridith Alexander.com. And then, of course, if you want to hear more about my daughter and my journey along this path to not just recovery, discovery, right? Uncovering, then join us on Facebook. So facebook.com/sky is the limit, spelled SCHUY is the limit. And reach out and say hello. You can buy the book Sky is the Limit, which are the actual Facebook posts from the first 4 months following the boulder drop. You can buy that on Amazon.
Absolutely.
And
I'll definitely get all this information for everybody listening in when it comes time to air her episode in the information section on the podcast. I'll make sure I get all the information, all the links for you. Make sure everybody checks out the show on Instagram and on Facebook at A Mental Health Break. And I'm also on Twitter at Podcasts by Lanci. I'm at Vincent A. Lanci on all social media and YouTube. And my website is vincentalanci.com. Be sure to check out my book, Left for Dead, A Story of Redemption, on Amazon now. And be sure to DM me or email me. Let me know what you think. If you liked today's episode, please continue listening and rate A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci 5 stars. I work very hard to find value delivering stories for you on each episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Mental Health Break with Vincent A. Lanci.